A 12-year-old girl was standing outside a local store when a police officer approached and accused her of loitering. When she told him her father was in special forces, he laughed right in her face. But just moments later, her father stepped out of the car, and everything changed. It was meant to be a quick stop. Ariel Tompkins had just finished her math tutoring session across the street and had walked over to the small neighborhood corner store in Madera, California. Her dad told her to wait outside while he ran in to grab some AA batteries and a phone charger. Nothing unusual, just an ordinary errand. But Ariel noticed the squad car the second it pulled into the parking lot. The engine was still running when the door creaked open and a heavy-set officer stepped out. He had a large thermos in one hand and a walkie-talkie clipped to his chest, spitting out bursts of static. At first, she didn't think much of it. She wasn't doing anything wrong, just quietly standing by the vending machines, watching cars go by. Her backpack rested on the ground at her feet. "Hey," the officer called out. "You. What are you doing out here?" Ariel turned slowly, unsure if he was speaking to her. "I said, what are you doing?" he repeated, walking toward her with quick, heavy steps. She blinked, confused. It felt like such a simple question, yet she wasn't sure how to answer. "I'm waiting for my dad. He's inside," she said. The officer frowned. "Uh-huh. Got any ID?" "I'm 12, she said hesitantly. He let out a dry chuckle and shook his head, as if that made the situation worse. "That's not what I asked," he replied. "You look like you're casing the place." "I don't even know what that means," she whispered. The officer narrowed his eyes at her like she was trying to be clever. He tapped the mic on his shoulder, but didn't press the button. "You got a phone?" She nodded. "It's in my bag." "Good. Call your parent. Right now." With trembling hands, she reached into her backpack, pulled out her phone, and dialed her dad. He didn't pick up on the first ring. The officer crossed his arms, watching her every movement like she might try to run. By the third ring, her father answered. "Dad," she said, her voice smaller than usual. "Can you come outside, please? There's an officer. He said I look like I'm casing the store." There was a pause on the line. Then, "All right. I'm coming." The call ended. Ariel slipped the phone back into her bag and looked up at the officer. "He's coming." The man gave her a look that said he didn't quite believe her. "Uh-huh. What's he do?" She hesitated. "He's in special forces." And just like that, the officer's entire demeanor shifted. "Special forces?" he repeated, eyebrows lit. Ariel didn't smile. She just lowered her eyes. But he wasn't finished. "Kid, I've been on this job for over 20 years, he said, voice tinged with mockery. "You know how many kids I've heard claim their dad's some hotshot in the FBI, CIA, or whatever? Too many. Doesn't fool me." She stayed silent. Her father had always told her, if someone doesn't respect you, don't try to win them over. Stay calm. Let them show you who they are. A woman walked out of the store carrying a bag of chips and a bottle of soda. She slowed slightly when she saw the officer standing over Ariel, her brows knitting in confusion, but she kept walking. Ariel shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Her dad still hadn't come out. Maybe there was a line. Maybe he didn't catch the stress in her voice over the phone. The officer glanced at the store windows, then back at her. "You know loitering's still a crime," he said. "Doesn't matter." Ariel didn't say a word. She waited. Her father always told her, when people overlook your worth, don't argue. Let them show who they are. Then you show them who raised you. Inside the store, a teenage cashier, maybe 17, maybe younger, had been watching through the window. She cracked the door open and called out. "She hasn't even been inside, sir." The officer turned his head sharply, clearly irritated. "You just worry about your register, miss," he snapped. The door shut again. Seconds ticked by. Ariel could feel the warmth of the car engine behind her as it shut off. The silence grew heavy. Even the officer started glancing around, like he'd just realized eyes might be on him. Then the driver's door opened. Master Sergeant Deshaun Tompkins stepped out. His boots hit the pavement with the kind of quiet authority that made people stop and look, without knowing why. He wasn't especially tall, but he didn't need to be. He stood the way someone stands when they're used to being heard. His desert tin uniform was clean, pressed, and unmistakable. His name was stitched across his chest, rank clearly marked on the sleeve. But it wasn't the clothes that made the officer shift his stance. It was his face. Unreadable, composed, and absolutely still. "Is there a problem here?" Deshaun asked, his voice calm, but carrying authority. The officer took a half step forward. "Your daughter," he said, gesturing vaguely. She was out here loitering. Said you were inside, but I didn't see anyone. I was inside, Deshawn replied evenly. You didn't see me because you didn't bother to look. The officer opened his mouth, like he had a response ready, but closed it again. The silence that followed wasn't long, but it was thick enough to change the temperature around them. The store's front door opened again. The teenage cashier stepped out, arms folded. Behind her came an older man, probably in his 60s, still clutching a receipt, his eyes flicking between the officer and the man in uniform. If there's been a misunderstanding, the officer started. Deshawn lifted a hand. No need. You already said it. He turned back to his daughter. You all right? Ariel nodded slightly, still not looking up. Go ahead and get in the car, he said gently. She obeyed without hesitation. As she passed the officer, she didn't say. The air had changed. The quiet was no longer calm. It was tense, expectant. Inside the SUV, Ariel sat stiffly in the passenger seat. Her hands were clenched tightly in her lap. She hadn't cried, not once, but her chest felt heavy. You okay? Deshawn asked again, eyes forward on the steering wheel. She didn't answer at first. Then, softly, she said, he laughed. Deshawn nodded. Yeah, he did. I don't think, he said. I know he did. She turned, she blinked slowly, then looked at him. Do you think he thought I was lying? Toward him, searching. Why? Finally, he looked back at her, met her gaze. Because the truth doesn't always match the stories people believe, he said. And some folks, when they hear the truth, they treat it like a joke. Especially when the truth comes from someone they've already decided isn't worth believing. Ariel swallowed hard. Outside the car, the deputy was speaking quietly into his radio, stealing glances at the SUV, but he wasn't leading the situation anymore. He knew it, and so did everyone else. Deshawn stepped out again, closing the door behind him with care. What's your name? He asked. The officer hesitated. Deputy Rick Malone. Deshawn gave a slow nod. And you thought my daughter looked suspicious? It wasn't about appearance, Malone said quickly. It was her behavior. Standing there alone with a backpack, it looked like loitering. I have to assess situations. That's my job. Deshawn raised an eyebrow. Did she argue? No. Did she raise her voice? No. She called me. Told you she didn't do anything wrong, the clerk said firmly. I watched the whole thing. She just stood there. Quiet. Malone's jaw tightened. Young lady, this doesn't concern. It does now, Deshawn cut in. It concerns everyone who's tired of watching kids be treated like criminals for existing in the wrong skin. From the edge of the building, another man stepped forward, arms folded across his chest. I've got a daughter too. And if a grown man hovered over her like that while she was minding her own business, I'd have something to say. Malone looked like he wanted to respond, something defensive, maybe dismissive, but the eyes on him held his words in place. His authority, once assumed, was slipping away with each silent second. From the front seat, Ariel watched without blinking. I'm sorry, he said. The words came out stiff and dry, like they tasted bitter. Ariel didn't move, didn't speak. Deshawn gave a small nod. Let's go. They got into the car. The SUV rolled out of the lot slowly. No rush, no drama, just silence. But the parking lot they left behind wasn't the same. What started as a quiet confrontation between a girl and a badge had become something bigger, a mirror, held up to everyone watching. And some didn't like what they saw. But what Ariel saw in the moment was only the beginning. The real fallout hadn't even started. They hadn't made it halfway down the block when her phone buzzed again. And again. Dozens of messages, group chats lighting up, missed calls from classmates, even a cousin she hadn't spoken to in over a year. Everyone had seen it. Dad, she murmured. Deshawn didn't take his eyes off the road. I know. She looked down. One of the store videos had already gone viral. The title read, Deputy Mock, I didn't do anything wrong, Ariel finally whispered. I know you didn't, Deshawn said. Then why did it feel like I was the one on trial? Deshawn took a deep breath. Because some people don't really see you. They see the version they've been told to expect. Doesn't matter how kind, how polite, how smart you are. They see a threat that isn't there. Ariel stared at her plate. I didn't cry. I know. But I wanted to. That's okay too. Her voice shook. He laughed in my face. Deshawn looked across the table, his expression steady. And you stood there anyway. That takes guts. More than most people have. Deshawn stood and opened the door. On the porch stood the store clerk, the same teenage girl from earlier. She looked nervous, a large manila envelope clutched to her chest. Hi, she said, glancing past Deshawn to glimpse Ariel. I printed the footage from our security cameras. Thought you might want a copy. Deshawn took the envelope, surprised. That's thoughtful. I also talked to my manager. Filed a formal complaint about what the officer said to her. I didn't want it to get swept under the rug. Deshawn nodded. That was brave. She shifted awkwardly. I don't know if it'll change anything. It already has, he replied. More than you realize. She handed him the envelope and left without another word. He closed the door and turned to Ariel. Ariel flipped the phone over and let it fall onto the blanket beside her. Downstairs, her father was on the phone with someone from the sheriff's department. They'd called earlier, wanted his account of what happened, said they were reviewing the matter. Deshawn had been polite, but firm. He told them what happened, gave them the badge number, and said the rest was already in the video. When he hung up, he found Ariel in the kitchen, pouring cereal into a bowl she clearly wasn't planning to eat. You okay? He asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Then finally, why are people mad at me for telling the truth? He leaned on the counter beside her. Because the truth makes some people uncomfortable, especially when it forces them to see something they've been trying to ignore. But I didn't yell. I didn't run. I didn't even talk back. You didn't have to, he said. Sometimes, just standing there is enough for someone to decide you're a threat. She pushed the spoon around the bowl. So what do I do now? Deshawn paused. You live. You keep being who you are. Before he left, Mr. Delarno handed Ariel a folded note. After the door closed, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten quote. You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can choose not to be reduced by them. Maya Angelou. She read it once. Then again. A third time. That night, she taped it to the side of her mirror. After finishing her homework, Ariel sat on the couch next to her dad while he watched an old military documentary. She wasn't paying much attention to the screen. Her mind kept drifting back to the moment the officer laughed at her. How small it made her feel. How that feeling had followed her home like a shadow. Dad? Yeah. Do people ever stop assuming things about you? He looked away from the TV. Some do. Some never will. But the way they see you doesn't decide who you are. She nodded, thinking it over. I want to talk about it. Talk about what? What happened? Not to stir things up, just so other kids don't feel like they're crazy when it happens to them. Deshawn lowered the volume and turned to her, eyes serious but warm. You sure about it? Ariel read the message again and again, not sure what made her respond with yes. Maybe it was the quote taped to her mirror. Maybe it was the quiet courage of the teenage clerk who had stepped forward. Or maybe, deep down, she was just tired of feeling like an inconvenience when she knew she wasn't one. The next week, Ms. Portillo set aside 15 minutes during Monday's writing period. Ariel stood at the front of the classroom, note cards in hand, fingers stiff, heart thudding so hard it echoed in her ears. I didn't do anything wrong, she began. Her voice barely made it past the first row of desks. 26 classmates turned to look at her, some curious, some unsure, a few skeptical. But all of them were listening. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't stealing. I wasn't even inside the store. I was just waiting. But when I told the officer you know why I joined the military? She shook her head. I was 17, coming home from a football game. I got pulled over for nothing. Officer said I didn't answer fast enough when he asked where I lived. Told me to step out, put my hands on the hood. Ariel's eyes widened. I remember thinking, if I'm already seen as dangerous, maybe I should at least learn how to handle dangerous things. So I enlisted. He didn't sound proud, just honest, like a man reflecting on the path he took when he felt like he had no other options. I stayed in for 20 years. Learned to lead. Learned to stay calm when everything around me wasn't. But I never forgot that night. That feeling of being judged before I even spoke. Ariel let it sink in, piece by piece. I don't want to join the military, she said quietly. Deshawn chuckled. Good. Don't ever do something just because the world scares you into it. She smiled, faint but real. So what should I do? He looked at her carefully. Tell the truth. Some parents in the crowd nodded as she spoke. One woman wiped away tears. A man in the back stood the entire time, arms folded, expression unreadable, but he listened. When she finished, the audience clapped. Not just polite clapping, genuine, steady applause. Later that night, on the drive home, Ariel looked out the window and said, I don't feel small anymore. Her father didn't answer right away. You never were, he finally said. And for the first time, she was beginning to believe that, not just for herself, but for others who'd stopped believing too soon. Almost a year to the day after the incident, Ariel stood behind a podium in the multipurpose room of Central Valley Middle School. Every folding chair was filled, parents, teachers, classmates, and even a few strangers, eyes facing this. That moment could have left me angry. It could have silenced me. But I had someone beside me who taught me that strength doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes it means staying still, unshaken, unmoved. In the front row, Deshaun sat quietly, arms folded, not in defiance, but in peace. He had heard every version of her story by now, but this was the first time she didn't need him to carry it. I'm not the only kid who's ever been questioned just for existing. I won't be the last. But I want to say something to anyone here who's ever felt too invisible or too different, or like your truth is too big for people to handle. She drew a breath, then leaned closer to the microphone. You don't need to shrink so others feel comfortable. You don't have to twist the truth because someone else can't face it. And if they laugh at you, let them. That says more about who they are than who you are. Applause followed, scattered at first, then growing. It wasn't thunderous, but it was real. After the event, people came up to her one by one. Some offered thanks. Some just held her hand. One boy quietly told her his brother had been stopped by police while biking home, and that he'd been told not to talk about it. Ariel didn't give advice. She just listened. Sometimes that's enough. That evening, back home, she placed a folder on her desk. Inside were articles, printed emails, and even a formal note of appreciation from the county sheriff's office. That line about strength not needing to shout. I think that's what made people stop and listen. She looked at him. You're the one who taught me that. He shrugged. All I did was remind you. It was already in you. They sat in a shared quiet, comfortable, warm. Then Ariel asked, do you think Officer Malone ever saw the video? I'd bet he did, Deshaun said. Probably more than once. Do you think he regrets it? He paused. Maybe. Maybe not. Ariel thought for a moment. I hope he does. But I didn't do this for him. Deshaun smiled. Exactly. That night, she added a final note to her mirror. She wrote it herself in thick black marker. Being doubted doesn't make you wrong. Keep standing. She didn't need anyone's permission anymore. And she didn't need their applause to know her story mattered. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply stay standing long enough for the truth to catch up.